Hello and welcome to this month's episode of the Divine Comedians podcast. I'm your host, Paula Wiseman, and today I am lucky enough to be chatting with actor and Irish comedy legend, Ardal O'Hanlon. So, hey Ardal, it's great to be chatting with you today.
Hello, Paula. Yes, a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So, you were born in Carrickmacross in
Yes.
Monaghan. So what were your school days like? Were you a fairly kind of outgoing kid, or did you just kind of try and keep your head down?
I don't know really. There's conflicting views on that actually. Like I always thought of myself as a very kind of a shy kid. Sort of kept myself to myself, but my family insist otherwise. You know, they say I was quite outgoing and that I probably did the talking for myself and my older brother, and you know that I was a bit of a storyteller and all that as a kid. But no, I kind of remember myself as being quite shy, like very outdoors in terms of football and
Yeah.
sport and all that. So I was always out running around playing football with the neighbors. But I don't remember like having a really close friend or anything like in
Mm.
primary school. You know, you were always part of a huge gang, like, and it was mainly football, like the various types of football that, you know, Gaelic football, soccer, and everything else. Um, but I remember just being very shy and very watchful and sort of didn't say anything in class, like never opened my mouth in class ever. Even though, you know, when I knew something and I was dying to express myself, I just didn't. And I think it was kind of like it's a funny one because you know I grew up in it's rural Ireland, it's small town,
Yeah.
it's the border which adds an extra little dimension to it in terms of, you know, you're very much encouraged to keep your head down generally. Yeah, and you don't say too much, or you know you know, because you're never quite sure who you're talking to and that kind of thing. So so you know I took that to heart anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean you were one of six. So
Yeah.
I mean I'd say you would have struggled to get a word in anyway if there's six of you.
Yeah, that's kind of true, actually. You know, and I was third. You know, and I actually was thinking about that quite a lot over the last few years because I just, you know, I just ended up doing comedy material on that during the last tour, and so I'd actually researched being a third child quite a lot, and it's, you know, I don't know how much, you know, you know you can take from that, but there has been a lot of research done, and third children definitely get the raw end of the stick. You know that I mean, my findings, Paula, if you're interested,
Yeah, go
include
on.
that most Nobel Prize winners in history in all disciplines are firstborn children,
Right.
which would suggest they have some sort of an advantage in terms of resources and in terms of like education and, you know, and attention and so on. The vast majority of astronauts are firstborn children. And this is an interesting one. Most U.S. presidents are firstborn children,
Oh wow.
and there are exceptions. And I don't need to tell you; you can guess who are the
Well, yeah.
exceptions. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
the recent President Donald Trump was a third child, and that kind of explains everything. So yeah, so yeah, it was a pretty noisy household. You know, we were a big family, kind of, I suppose, like a happy fam. I don't know how to, you know, people say like, was your childhood happy and things like that. I don't really know. I mean, I
Mm.
suppose, yeah, I guess, but you kind of have nothing to compare it to in a way, do you? You know?
Yeah, true. So you got a degree in
Yeah.
communication studies. So I mean, what was the plan? Was there a kind of grand plan for when you kind of got unleashed onto the world, onto the working side of things?
No, not really at all. When I left college, I mean, I went straight into comedy, you know,
Mm.
bizarrely. There was no real comedy scene in Ireland at the time, but a few people I went to college with, namely Kevin Gildee and Barry Murphy and Dermot Carmody, who had all done the same course as I did, we just set up a comedy club, you know, out of boredom as much as anything else. Sort of the first, I suppose, what you might call alternative comedy club in
Yeah,
Ireland,
yeah.
or one of the first anyway, just above a pub in the International Bar and in Dublin. And you know, we I don't know why really we did that. We sort of, yeah, it was like, but there was no plan. I mean, there was certainly no plan to be a comedian or anything like that. You know, I was certainly inspired by sort of punk and new wave.
Mm.
by Dadaism in art
Yeah,
and things like
yeah,
that. So it was all very kind of, you know, not certainly not radical. I mean, there was no real, radical manifesto or anything to change the world. It was more, it was just that kind of do-it-yourself ethos, because there was nothing much going on in Ireland. Like, and it was interesting. The course we did, like, it was a communications course. Like, most of the people went into, in fact, you couldn't say most of the people went into anything. Everyone went into something different.
yeah,
70 people who graduated with me, and I would say, everyone went into a different field. Some went into advertising, some went into TV production, some went into radio, some went into business. Some people, went into the creative arts, like I did, and uh, but generally speaking, there was no work. There was a huge recession in
yeah.
Ireland at the time. A lot of my friends that would have emigrated, and we sort of hung about Dublin, and there was a bit of a, I don't know, there was a bit of an art scene. Like, there was, every second person seemed to have a guitar case in their hand, and possibly a guitar in the guitar case, who knows. And then there was a lot of poets. You'd see people reading poetry on the street for
Yeah.
money. There was a lot of singer-songwriter nights in the pubs. There was a great music scene in Dublin in those days. I mean, like in the International Bar where we ended up, we could only get a Wednesday night because every other night of the week there was some sort of a thing on. There was like a jazz band one night, a blues band another night, singer songwriter night another night. So like there was a lot of bands and a lot of kind of, certainly a lot of creativity, you know, uh, and I think we kind of tapped into that a little bit in the absence of anything more practical to do.
Yeah, I mean, your dad, famously a TD and doctor. So was he kind of saying to you, like, Ardal, what are you doing with your life? Or
Yeah.
was he fairly laid back and just kind of said, right, you do what you want to do?
No, no, I wouldn't say that. I think both my parents were very concerned about this career
Yeah.
choice. They just couldn't get. I mean, I don't think they couldn't understand it really. It came from nowhere. It came from left field. There was no real tradition of it in our house. My mother was an actress in college in her university days in Galway, and so she loved theatre and she loved books. And I suppose I inherited some of that
Mm.
kind of, that kind of her genes in that respect. And she did write a little bit as well. I would say, there was definitely some sort of an artist in her, but like she devoted her life to raising children, and she was a teacher for a while as well, in her younger days. But she always encouraged reading and stuff like that. So I suppose part of her was probably quite, I wouldn't say thrilled about it, but like, was curious about it. I would say, but she like comedy was sort of a little bit too offbeat for her. I think, that type of comedy, I'd say at that
Mm.
time anyway. But they've certainly come around to it since. Like, I think eventually, after maybe 30 years, they understand.
It seems to be very
Still an interesting.
generational, doesn't it? A very generational thing, like things that we would be into. Our parents would be like, what are you even watching? What are you doing? This is
Yeah, I know
mental.
it. Yeah, exactly. And like, even, when they did come along, like, I suppose they would have come along early enough. Maybe in that first year or two, they would have seen it with their own eyes and but they probably saw it like with 12 people in the audience, and it been very sloppy and shoddy and very under rehearsed. And and myself and Barry and Kevin were like, we formed a trio after a while, and we were always bickering on stage. It was ridiculous. It was so, I mean, it was part of the attraction, I suppose, in a way, and part of the whole part of our thing after a while was that we'd be arguing over who's got the props, and did you not bring the prop for the next sketch? And but everyone, that was all happening in real time, in front of everyone. So I suppose they just, like, because the comedy we were doing at the time, I suppose, was a little bit avant-garde, for want of a better description. It was very silly, very goofy. We love things like Reeves and Mortimer and stuff like that. And I suppose we would have liked Monty Python and things as well. So we were drawing on various influences, and of course, like, our own literary influences, Flann O'Brien and Beckett and stuff like that as well, which we would have all been reading at the time. So we were trying, so that's certainly that sort of, we were very attracted to the surreal and the slightly the very silly. I mean, it was mainly silly stuff that we were doing, silly sketches.
Yeah. So I mean, Mr. Trellis. I mean, where did the name come from for the group? Was it a joint
Well,
decision?
it was, I think we were all just sitting around firing names out there, and I think that was just the one that people sort of responded to. And I think it does come from At Swim Two Birds, which is the Flann O'Brien novel. There was a character in that called Dermot Trellis. So but I don't think we were conscious of that. It might have been Kevin who suggested that name. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not sure if it was consciously invoking the character from At Swim Two Birds, but it fitted in with the type of thing we were doing. And originally the sketch group was called Mr. Trellis the Mormon,
Hmm.
which and again I don't know how that came about. And then it just got shortened to Mr. Trellis, and I think we hung about for about 5 or 6 years, doing our thing.
Yeah, there was obviously a very kind of a like-mindedness between the three of you to kind of
Yeah.
have that wherewithal to put together this, open what was Ireland's first proper comedy club.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, there was no real drive there. That was kind of like, the history books may well record that we opened the comedy club, but if you actually study the mechanics of it, like, it was
Yeah.
three guys, who went into a pub one day and said, "Hello, can we use that room upstairs on a Wednesday afternoon?" We didn't have a microphone, we didn't have posters, we didn't have, we didn't have anything. Like, and we had we had cardboard props that we made ourselves. So it was all very casual. Like, I can't stress to you how casual it was. And what united us more than anything was a sort of a very laissez-faire attitude to everything. Like, we all loved football, and we loved music, and we loved cinema, and we loved talking shite in pubs. That was what really brought us together. And writing the occasional sketch, like, one sketch every 3 weeks, maybe. So it was. I mean, it wasn't very organized. And I mean, like, that's for the first 2 or 3 years. After a while, when you realize, okay, we can actually do this, and
Yeah.
we are improving, and then you take it more seriously. But certainly for the first few years, it was just a way to pass the time.
Yeah. I mean, like stand-up wise, when you started, it was the three of you.
Yeah.
So how
Well, it
did
was the
your
four of us to begin with. It
the
was
four of
four of
you?
us.
Yeah.
Dermot was there, and then there was
Yeah.
a
And
few other
Dermot.
people. Like, there was a sort of a few solo artists and a few other sketch groups who actually joined in that early part, in that year, or first year, or first 2 years. So there was a little group, a little scene emerging, and we all supported each other, I suppose, in one way or another.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, since then you kind of went solo and did
Yeah.
you were doing your own stand-up stuff. So, I mean, what was your first solo stand-up gig like?
I suppose the sketch group, like, we always did little chunks, little monologues. That was, I suppose, that was stand up, or it was maybe character based. So I had a character who was a sort of a caretaker of a community center, for example. Um, Kevin had an old fogey character who reminisced about the old days. So we kind of introduced those characters into the sketch show. And I suppose over time, as we drifted apart creatively, like, we
Mm,
were still very good friends, thankfully, after all these years. But as we sort of start doing other things ourselves, like, the chunks of stand up became the bigger part of the sketch show. So it basically became three big monologues, interspersed with a few little sketches. So I suppose it was a very natural sort of gravitation towards stand up then after that. And I remember, like, certainly, because I wasn't a natural performer by any means. Terribly nervous getting up on stage, and I suppose I took refuge in a sort of a persona, in a character, and my character was someone who was very frightened and bewildered, and that became my stand-up persona, and it worked very well for me. Like, even though it wasn't planned, it was just the way I was. It was my natural terror of performing. Sort of, I used that, actually, as part of the stand-up persona, uh, and it just became a thing, and it just started, it worked. Like, it's yeah, I don't really know. It just sort of worked. And but again, like, there was no real prospects. Like, we went to Edinburgh once or twice, and we took part in competitions, newcomer competitions, and we did well in them. But, like, again, like, we saw, like, in England at that time, and in Britain, there was amazing stuff going on, and we were hugely inspired by that, but daunted by it, like, because it just seemed on another level. Like, it seemed very sophisticated compared to what we were doing. So I suppose we always had that in the back of our minds, that, like, this is what we're aiming for. We could see the possibilities, maybe, or we could, you were very aware of what was happening in the world of comedy through our visits to Edinburgh and the odd visit to London.
Mm. Yeah, you hear that from a lot of comedians. They suffer from incredible nerves before they go on stage, but as soon as they're on the stage, they're there and they're kind of in the moment. So, I mean, do you still suffer from nerves, would you say, when
I
you're doing
wouldn't
stand up?
really. No, I wouldn't. I mean, I'd still suffer from self-doubt. It wouldn't be the same as the kind of, that nervous energy that I would have had first, like, 20 years of my career. It wouldn't really be now. I know I definitely conquered it, like, maybe, and it's only in the last 10 or 15 years that I probably got over it to a huge degree. But I mean, it was always fine once you're up there, as you
Yeah,
suggest. Like, it's always fine once you're up there. Like, you have the impulse to do it, so that doesn't go away. And even though, and you're quite prepared to go through the horrors, like, before going on stage. And it used to last for hours in my case, where you wouldn't be able to eat. You'd be pacing up and down. You'd be thinking
yeah,
about the gig all day long. And it wasn't a sensible way to live your life or anything. But once you were up on stage, and once you got going, and once you delivered the material that you worked on and people responded to it, like, it was a great feeling, and it was worthwhile. I would have to say, in the end, it was worthwhile. And you had this tremendous relief after the show, which more than compensated for the terror before the show. Uh, because you want to do it. Like, ultimately, you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't want to do it.
yeah,
Like, I didn't
yeah.
have to do it. No one was forcing me to do it.
Yeah, I suppose, and you kind of get that energy from the crowd as well, that they obviously
Yeah.
want to see you.
Yeah, that's right. And then all the self-doubt, which just, I think it goes with the territory, really.
Mm,
Even the most apparently confident people, I think, this do suffer from self-doubt. I think a lot of performers probably do, and they do need that kind of approval, and they don't want to let people down.
yeah,
It is interesting, the more you meet people who work in these areas, the more you come across this. So, it's kind of it's a peculiar thing, but it never goes away, the self-doubt. Like, but you know from experience that
yeah,
if you work on your stuff and you craft it, and you know it's going to be fine. Like it is going to be fine. The audience like it. You're good at your job, and they like it. So you'd think that the self-doubt would go away, but it doesn't. It never does.
yeah. And I suppose 9 times out of 10, people have paid to see you specifically.
Yeah.
So people will no doubt know you best as being Father Dougal McGuire in Father Ted. It's often said to be one of the greatest and most loved shows in TV history. How did that journey begin? Did you already know Arthur and Graham already,
um
or how did it all start?
well, it kind of started back in Ireland. So I left Ireland in 1994 to do
Uh-huh.
comedy in England, to do stand up. So no real acting experience or acting background, or even ambitions to be an actor. But I had done amongst the very few things I did before leaving Ireland was a thing called Hamlet and Our Brothers, which was an RTE drama, which was, I suppose, before its time. It was a radical reworking of the Hamlet story, where Hamlet was a girl, and I played the Ophelia character, who was Owen, who was a
Right.
kind of a gormless character. And it was only a small little role in a very small drama that very few people would have seen. But it was Arthur had seen it, bizarrely.
Mm.
Arthur, who doesn't miss anything on TV. I think he's seen everything that has ever been made on television. So he saw it, and it stuck in his head. And so when it came to when Arthur and Graham started writing Father Ted, and they did a pilot for Father Ted, I think, or they'd written a pilot for Father Ted, that Arthur says, anyway, you'd have to ask him just to verify this, that he always had me in mind as Dougal,
Wow.
based on that tiny little cameo in this forgotten drama on RTE. So I was in London maybe about 6 months, and Arthur and Graham had come to see me doing gigs from time to time. I didn't know them well, but I was on nodding terms with Arthur. Uh, and I remember going for a few drinks with them afterwards. And that was the first time they ever mentioned to me that they had this part that they thought I might be suitable for. And then it was probably a few months after that I ended up doing an audition for it. And again, Arthur and Graham were there, and they were kind of putting me forward for it, and I think they had convinced quite a lot of people that I was the right man for the job. And then it was a few months later, again, I was at the Edinburgh Festival. I was doing a show there, and one of the leading producers came to that show, and it was at that point then that they told me that I had got the part. So yeah, it was a bit of a rigmarole. I mean, it wasn't something that, like, I was, by the time I left Ireland to go to London, like, I was so, so carried away almost with my stand-up career in London. It
Yeah.
was going very well, and I really wasn't thinking about Arthur and Graham's, project on television or anything like that. Like, it was, if it came about, that would have been a bonus. I mean, everything was going very well, for me at that time in stand-up. So I wasn't thinking about anything else.
Yeah. I mean, nobody could have seen how huge Ted got, it's just, it seems that it's definitely got legs,
Yeah, no, it did. I think it stood the test of time, all right. Yeah, yeah. No, it's very flattering that people like it still, and that it has, it's transcended television in a way as well. Clearly, in Ireland, it's part of, it's seeped into the popular consciousness in a funny way, and it's regularly name checked in the Dáil, and in court you often hear it mentioned, references to that money was just resting in my account, and at protests you see people with the signs down with that sort of thing. So it definitely has legs, as you say.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy. So, I mean, did your stand-up persona, did it influence how you played Dougal, or was he kind of like set in stone already? Did Arthur and Graham have him, you say, right, this is what we want, and then you kind of did it? Did you sort of bring anything to him,
Yeah, I
his
don't really
mannerisms and
know.
things?
Yeah, well, I suppose I did really. I mean, I think they were flexible enough about it. I think what they were very keen not to do was to do a really obvious stupid character. They wanted something kind of otherworldly, almost like. Um, so I didn't consciously bring anything to the Dougal character. I just remember reading it for them, and them laughing and liking what I was doing. So I suppose what you bring to it, like, it's largely like, you're not conscious of it really, but
Yeah.
you're bringing your entire comedy experience to date to it, and not just your experience of performing and your comedy instincts, which had been honed on the stage for a year, a good few years at that stage, but you're bringing your whole experience of watching comedy on television. So, like, the kind of things I watched growing up, like Laurel and Hardy, like Blackadder, like Faulty Towers and stuff like that. So, it became clear to me, if not then, certainly not long after I started doing it, that I was very inspired by Stan Laurel. I was very inspired by Baldrick. I was very inspired by Manuel, what's his name, Manuel in Faulty
Manuel,
Towers.
yeah.
Those kind of sidekick characters, who are apparently very stupid, but actually, they're really there to undermine the main character. So I suppose you kind of, you subconsciously kind of, you kind of invoke those kind of characters, and then you just bring to bear, your instincts, like, and and your face and your mannerisms, and
Mm,
your voice, and then you just respond to the material. That's kind of the main thing. It's like, it's how you interpret it. Like, everyone's going to interpret it differently. So, I think they just got lucky with the cast in a way that we gelled together. I think we all brought something to our characters, that, other people might have brought something better or something worse or something different, but you bring whatever you can to it. And then, in the rehearsal room, you kind of embellish stuff a bit. So that's
yeah.
that's kind of, the writers were great in the sense that they had a very clear idea of what they wanted, but within that framework, they were quite open to suggestion and open to anything that improves the script. They were on for. And they had a fantastic production team. Like, Hattrick were one of the, and still are probably one
Yeah.
of the preeminent comedy production teams in the UK. And they were pretty much allowed to do what they want. Channel 4 were very, flexible in that regard as well. And, so they pretty much let them get on with it and do whatever they want. And there was a brilliant producer that first year called Jeffrey Perkins, who's
Mm,
just one of the great legendary comedy producers that Britain has produced, certainly in the 80s and 90s. And I would call him a sort of a mentor for me personally. He was
Yeah.
just great. He gave me every encouragement. He was a big fan of mine. And, when I was unsure of what to do, he would always encourage me to go for it, and take a chance. So you would do that in rehearsal. You would do it on the recording nights as well in front of the live audience. You would take a chance. You would improv something, or just try a line in a different way, or do something stupid like physical.
Yeah.
And if they liked it, they'd keep it in, and if they didn't, wouldn't. So it was a great experience. Particularly for someone like me who wasn't really an actor, and didn't,
Yeah.
hadn't really had very little, if any, experience. So it was a brilliant learning curve, and to work with great people, and we always had great guest actors as well, and I loved all that side of it. And because as a stand-up, you end up on your own a lot of the time, on your own, working on your own, tearing your hair out, trying to come up with jokes and stuff like that. So to be working in a fun, collaborative exercise like that is just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, that was the beauty of Dougal. He didn't even have to speak. Even with a look, he'd just be cracking up at this, totally vacant.
Yeah.
There was stuff going on, but we never really knew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I never really knew. No, I've said this before. Like, I used to, because I really didn't want him to be like a stupid Irishman, which is obviously a trope, particularly in England and in British culture, for the last couple of 100 years, the stupid Irishman. So, we were always like very conscious that we were playing with those stereotypes, and we didn't want to reinforce them in any way. But we wanted to kind of have fun with them. So I used to kind of like, I used to take it very seriously in terms of on the night, try and stay very focused.
Yeah.
On the recording nights, particularly, and and I used to always think of myself as more a dog than a human. You know what I mean? Like, so it wasn't stupidity. It was canine sort of logic, or it was like the loyalty of a dog, the trust of a dog, the good fun of a dog, the good companionship that a dog brings. So that's kind of what that there's like. I like to think there's that quality in Dougal, that that he's a beloved pet, but he can be very frustrating as well for poor Ted.
Yeah, I mean, you could see there was it seemed like a very natural connection between you and Dermot on screen. I mean, so had you met Dermot, Frank, or Pauline beforehand, or was it literally you were all kind of brought together?
Well, Ireland's a pretty small country, and the comedy community in Ireland's even smaller. So, yeah, I suppose I would have met them all at some stage. Couldn't say I knew any of them. Pauline, I probably knew better than the others because I'd done a radio thing with her a couple of years before Father Ted. Dermot, I'd only met once on a children's TV show once where we were both guests, but I couldn't say I knew him. And Frank went to school with my father, but because Ireland's such a ridiculously small country, but I didn't know him. I had never met him. But I'd watched him growing up, as I'd watched Dermot growing up as well.
Yeah.
So, and then when they decided on both Dermot and myself separately, they brought us together then for sort of another. It wasn't really an audition because at this stage we'd both been cast, I think, but it was to just see if we'd gel and all the rest. And we got together, and so that was the first time we really got together and read it together, and it just seemed to work. I don't think Dermot hadn't overthought it either. A bit like me, he wasn't coming from an acting background. He was very much coming from a comedy thing, and I suppose we just relied on our wits and our instincts and didn't take it too seriously.
Yeah, I mean, Frank was a proper actor, wasn't he? He's like,
Yeah, Frank was a proper actor, and Pauline was a great actor as well. Like,
yeah.
Pauline was. I'd seen her in plays as well, and she was great, and Frank was great, and so they brought that acting sort of ballast to it, and then all the guest actors came in with their thing as well. Now we used a lot of comedians as well in the guest roles, which was great because I knew most of those guys. They were from my generation, and I'd worked with them a lot, so it was always great to see who they'd pick every week, who cast in the guest roles, and and as any fan of Father Ted knows, the guest roles, like there's some very memorable ones. Graham Norton, Michael Redmond playing Father Stone, Jim Norton, playing Bishop Brennan. So it was just great. That was one of the best parts of it was who's our victim this week?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, you kind of see Joe Rooney and Tommy
Yeah,
Tiernan, and
that's right.
it was
Jason
a
Byrne.
who's
Yeah,
who of Ireland,
yeah.
comedy talent, really.
Barry Murphy, Kevin Gilty. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone did a bit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, poor Kevin as Father Cave on the on the
Yeah,
flight into terror. Oh man,
yeah, yeah.
poor guy, poor guy. So I mean, did you become like I don't know, like a family unit? Did you learn a lot from the others, acting
Um,
wise?
Learn not what not to do.
Yeah, yeah,
No, yeah, we became very close, I suppose.
yeah,
You can't but, it was just great fun. But like there was no real, yeah, I think we were all in the same boat. Like
yeah,
sitcom was very new to all of us, really.
yeah.
And I was the only one living in Britain at the time. The others were all over, so it was very much a holiday camp thing for them. So it just became a big bunch of Irish people in London. So you can imagine what that was like. And then the recording nights, everyone had family and friends over, so they became just great nights out for people. So it was a very memorable time, really. Very, I've nothing but fond memories of the time, and it would never seem like hardship or anything.
Mm,
It's not like you do dramas and you're on set all day long and you're doing things out of sequence and you're working very very long hours sometimes and and it can be quite taxing, but sitcom is not like that.
mm.
It's just it is the perfect way of working. You do gentle rehearsals for 5 days of the week and then you have a wonderful night on the recording night, where you put it all together. It's just a great way of working.
Yeah. So I mean, what memories do you have? Do you have any kind of specific memories of filming the series? I mean, I came to two of the episode filmings. It was the over
Did you really?
75,
Wow.
the over 75s football match.
Yeah.
And also the very final one. And I've got this vivid memory of Dermot doing the shaft dance.
Oh yeah.
And I remember they made him do it like 4 times, and everyone
That's
was
right.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they kept making him do it over and over again.
Yeah.
And also I've got vivid memories of Eddie Bannon dressed as Mrs. Doyle as well for the final filming, which is kind of worrying. But what sort of memories do you have? It must have all kind of happened very quickly.
Well, I mean, I suppose just coming from stand up, it's just really the working with the group was just great, and all the lunches. I remember I lunch, it's probably my favorite word in the English language. So I remember that. And then having a couple of drinks after rehearsal, and it was. I mean, the memories kind of blur into each other. Like I have very fond memories of working on location in County Clare,
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
most part, down in the Burren, and all the people we met there, and you know, you can picture the scene there. Like we sort of requisitioned a local hotel in Ennistimon, the Falls Hotel, and we were very well looked after there. And you had this big English crew, predominantly an English crew, some Irish crew, and all the different actors, and we're all holed up in this hotel, and so that becomes it's just a great atmosphere, and you know, again, it's a kind of a party, really.
Yeah, I mean, even like the Song for Europe episode has just become, like this. It's like an anthem. It's almost,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
lovely horse, and the video, obviously with
yeah,
you and Dermot in your sparkly
yeah,
jackets and stuff. It's just, yeah, just all so magical.
yeah. No, I mean, I like if you asked me a different day, I'd remember a different scene or a
Yeah.
different thing we filmed, or a different day we filmed, or a different guest actor. But I mean, it's all about people. Any of these things are.
Mm,
So what you're enjoying in the moment is the company of the people you're with. You've already read the script numerous times, so you've had your laugh at that, if you know what I mean. And then when it actually comes down to the mechanics of it, like it's the little bits in between filming that you remember. The I don't know, the company, really, I suppose.
yeah, I suppose you can only kind of gauge it when you're in the studio and filming in front of a live audience,
Yeah,
and getting that feedback from the people watching it. I suppose it's the only way of gauging.
yeah.
what you're
Yeah,
doing.
exactly. You don't know, and certainly that first couple of, the first series, like we didn't have a clue what to expect. I don't think anyone did really. And even on the night when people are laughing, you think, well, yeah, but like, they're just why why are they laughing? You're not quite sure, and then it's only when you see it all put together a few months later that you kind of go, okay, right, now I see, yes, and it seemed to work, and yeah.
That's the thing, I suppose. If you're just filming little bits, when you're doing stuff on location, you're obviously not going to know what the end product is going to look like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you really don't. I mean, you get a good sense of it in the studio, when it's all put together. You kind of, and you definitely know what you're trying to achieve in each scene. But it isn't until you see it all together. But even then, like, you still don't know that it's going to become
Yeah.
a cultural phenomenon. You certainly don't expect that, and that we're still going to be talking about it 25 years later. So that's something you couldn't imagine in your
Yeah.
wildest dreams, really.
Yeah. So I mean, you've probably been asked this dozens of times. But do you have a favourite scene from the series?
Um, well, again, that would just change from day to day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um,
What's your current one?
my current one, it's kind of like a line. Like, I might be talking to my wife in the house, and she might just quote a line or something. I remember Fargo Boyle saying he felt very guilty, I think, and he was telling his sheep, "Don't look at me, don't look at me." And I don't know, the other night, my hair was in a terrible way, and I think I said that to my wife, "Don't look at me, don't look at me." So it's sort of, these lines come out of nowhere sometimes, that you just remember, like a ridiculous line or something. I mean, I suppose I love the video for the Euro song. I mean, just filming
Yeah.
that was very improvised, and I suppose it's a little bit of ego. Some of the improvised moments you quite like. You kind of remember them quite well. That was good. Just yeah, no, just
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
yeah, no. I mean, I love it all. I remember it all quite well, but
I mean, there's so much of it, isn't there? I mean, I'd
yeah,
say it'd be
yeah.
so difficult to say, oh, there's just this one
I know
particular
exactly,
scene.
and saying it out of context is kind of ridiculous as well, because, like, there would have been so much going on around it at the time as well. So it's very hard to say. It's very hard. It's impossible to say. In
Yeah.
fact, it wouldn't be fair. It'd be like saying which is your favorite child. It's not. It's just not right. It's just not. It's not right to put me on the spot like that.
Yeah. So, which is your favourite child?
Um, Macaulay Culkin in
Oh,
Home Alone.
so did you end up nicking any? Well, I say nicking, but did you end up keeping any props from the set that you
Now,
want
I
to
don't
talk
quite know how to answer
about?
this question, Paul. Exactly. I'm not sure if I want to talk about it, because I don't want to. I don't want to
Incriminate. Yeah.
incriminate myself, number one,
Yeah.
or encourage people to, you know, uh, no, no. The one thing I did take is, and it's a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
Well, I no, actually, I took a number of things. Like, first of all, I took
Oh my
all the spare dog collars. I
Right.
brought all them home, but I gave them away over the years. I used to sign them and give them to charities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I took as many tank tops as I could get my hands on, but again, I gave all them away over the years. I have during the Elvis episode, sorry, during the talent contest episode, 3 stages of Elvis. I'm not sure, but either way, I was dressed. Father Dougal, Father Ted, and Father Jack all dressed as early Elvis in the leather jumpsuit. I still have that leather jumpsuit. That's gathering mold at the moment in my attic. I could never figure out quite what to do with that. I'm just waiting for the right home for that. My most treasured possession from the Father Ted set is the little painting that Father Stone did of himself and Father Ted. It was a tiny little painting that was above the mantelpiece
Yeah. Yeah.
in subsequent series. So on the last day, I just nicked that. I don't think I took that anywhere. I just took it.
It's all right. We won't tell anybody.
So that is the only thing that I have, like, on my wall, if you like.
So does the jumpsuit still fit, or have you,
That's
have you
very
not?
personal,
You've
Paula. I haven't tried it on in a few years. Let's
Oh,
put it that way.
maybe that's something you could do in the,
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I've just still got this vivid memory of Father Jack with on the for the Elvis thing with holding the hamburger.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I mean, it's become such a cult thing. Ted has just become this cult thing with catchphrases. Obviously, you were saying earlier, like, careful now, and all these little phrases, even like Mrs. Doyle, and go on, go on, go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, how long did it take for you to realize how big Ted had gotten?
I suppose it wasn't really till after the second series. I mean, I knew after the first series that it had got traction and that in certain quarters it was highly regarded. I don't think it really took off in Ireland until after the second series. I remember the reviews for the first series in Ireland weren't great.
Yeah.
People didn't quite get it, or they were wary of it to begin with. And then it was after the second series, I just think it kind of hit its groove, and people, the whole country sort of tuned in. So it was probably around then, and by then it was picking up awards. I think even after the first series, it was certainly been nominated for the comedy awards and things like that.
Yeah.
And after the second series, it was probably been nominated for BAFTAs and stuff like that. So, yeah, it just gathered momentum, and certainly by the third and final series, it had got quite a large following, and like for Channel 4, it had record viewing figures. I think they're certainly like really good viewing figures. I mean, we always saw, even then, like we still saw it as a kind of a culty comedy. It wasn't a BBC mainstream comedy. It was, it like we thought its destiny was to remain an obscure sort of late night, typical Channel 4 sort of offbeat comedy. But for whatever reason, it just had that mainstream appeal. It was very likable. I think it was very colourful. And the characters were kind of larger than life, but you could relate to them on one level, certainly. And I suppose Irish people got a slightly different thing from it than maybe English people did, but I think the English love it in a similar way. But I think the Irish like really kind of have a kind of an ownership to it in a sense. The Irish audience, they really get it in a special way.
Yeah, no, I was just remembering Dougal's He-Man duvet.
Oh yeah.
And you always seem to be in an Ireland football top.
Yeah,
at various stages of the.
Yeah. I think that was yeah. He was just very boyish, He was like doggish and boyish, and slightly otherworldly. They were the kind of notes that I always tried to play with Dougal.
Yeah, I don't know. He had a bit of a sort of childish.
Yeah,
very loosely, very childish quality to him. Very innocent.
Innocent, naive. I always thought like that's better than stupid. Just like, out in it. Like, I mean, I know he's stupid. There's no getting away from it. But like, it is that. It's just tapping into that naivety was the key thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so talk about the very last episode. I mean, do you think Ted ended at the right time? Do you think it could have gone on, or do you think it? And obviously, with the absolutely shocking passing of Dermot, I'd gone to the filming of the very last episode,
right, yeah.
And I got home the next morning, and I was like, oh my God, that was so amazing. And my dad was like, did you hear the news? And then he told me about Dermot, and I couldn't believe it. So I mean, even that, like for me, I mean, the shock for the rest of you must have been, incredible.
It was pretty shocking, all right. Yeah. No, it was. It was. I mean, I've talked about it before many times. I mean, it was pretty devastating on a personal level. But like, it was unexpected as well. It was, it was bizarre. That something like this would happen on such a, when we had just gone out on such a high.
Yeah.
Everyone thrilled to finish the third and final series. I mean, everyone was very clear that this was going to be the final series. The writers particularly were adamant that they had gone as far as they could with the characters. Mind you, that didn't stop them trying to write a musical many years later.
Yes.
Let's not go there. I'm joking. But Yeah, so it was surreal, it was kind of surreal timing. We'd all plans, plans for the future. We were all
Yeah,
looking forward to what was next in our careers and so on. And Dermot had loads of ideas and loads of things in the pipeline, and he had the world ahead of him, and he left a young family, and
yeah.
his partner Fiona and everything. Yeah, it was just it was shocking.
Yeah, it was just so crazy to see how energetic he was in that final episode.
Mm,
I was saying earlier about doing the shaft dance, and I just, it just makes me laugh every time I think of him doing it. But
yeah, yeah,
to just think that
yeah.
it all happened so quickly,
Yeah,
it's
well, I suppose
crazy.
he had obviously health issues that we weren't really
Yeah,
aware of, and he possibly shouldn't have been doing the shaft dance over and over again. But there you go.
yeah. So I mean, what do you think it is about Ted that makes people love it so much? I mean, you put Channel 4 on of an evening, and there's always an episode on. And as I said, people are quoting lines, and people watch the episodes. You can watch the episodes
Yeah,
continuously. I mean, what do you think it is about the series that people love so much?
yeah. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I think it's got a timeless quality.
Yeah,
I think that's helped by the fact that it's on a remote island that probably hasn't changed in 100 years. Um, it probably looks like that now today if you went to an island like that. So they've created this fictional island that's is sort of like outside time,
yeah, yeah,
in a sort of a parallel universe. So you have that. The fact that they're priests as well, so even the fashions don't change that much over the decades. Uh, and I think it's like it has a real innocent quality to it, even though it can be pretty satirical in places, particularly about the church.
mm,
And it can have a fairly the occasional vicious swipe. It's very friendly. It's like it appeals to all ages. It's just really likable, and I think there's a real vulnerability about the three of them. And Mrs. Doyle, like they're all lost souls. So people warm to the characters, I think. So even though it's quite surreal in places, you still you have a lot of empathy for the characters, and I think that's the key thing, really.
yeah. I like to
You know,
think that they're all still there on
they're
Craggy
all still
Island, and
there. They're all, Father Ted's still hustling away.
the money's
Coping with
still resting in his account.
money still resting in his account. He's still coping with adversity. He's
Yeah,
still,
still battling with Rugged Island.
still being sabotaged by Dougal. You know, um, yeah, no.
Yeah.
And then, you can't take away from the craft either. Like the writers are exceptionally good
Oh
writers,
yeah,
and
incredible.
that's that's important to note. Like, they're students of comedy. They're comedy writers to the core of their being. So their attention to detail is incredible. I can certainly vouch for that. And their approach to the craft of sitcom writing is probably second to none. And they were hugely inspired by shows like Seinfeld, shows like The Simpsons,
Yeah,
and stuff like that. So it's got quite a few dimensions to it. More than perhaps meets the eye sometimes. It's got a great visual quality to it. A lot of kind of visual jokes thrown in there. You know, I just think it's a very well crafted comedy. Ultimately.
yeah. I mean, they had a bit of a track record, didn't they? Obviously, Black Books was huge with Dylan Moran and Bill Bailey, and then they did Fast Show, inventing Ted and Ralph for the Fast Show again, who became
Hmm.
quite big characters. So they had a good, they've got a good track record with
Yeah,
where
no, no,
comedy
absolutely,
concerned.
absolutely. And yeah, no, they had a show called Paris as well with Alexi.
Yeah, with Alexi Sale. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, they were great, and they'd written for Smith and Jones, the last Smith and Jones. I remember they used to write for that, sketches for that, and they wrote for Alan Partridge as well, and they contributed to some of his stuff. So yeah, they've been around.
So you were also in the hugely popular Death in Paradise a few years ago. We absolutely loved that. So were you out there for long periods of time? How did it work with filming and things? Did your family go with you?
Yeah, so you would be out for maybe up to 6 months of the year.
Oh
I,
wow.
I would I did 4 summers, believe it or not, on Death in Paradise, and it would be sort of from April to September typically, and my family would probably come out for a month in the middle of
Yeah.
all of that. So that would be the only time I'd see them. But like even by the end, like they didn't come out. Uh, now I was doing a much shorter stint the last time because I left halfway through that last series that I did. But like even they were sick of it and they were just holiday makers, you know. So it was great, but it was, you know, it was like you couldn't sustain it year after year after year. It was, you know, it was like a big wrench from home, really was the main thing. But it was great. Like it was such a life changing experience in many
Mm.
ways. You know, it was a very different lifestyle, and it was great to be part of it.
Yeah. I mean, what was the heat like? Was it as hot as it looked?
Oh, the heat was very hot, and it was more than that. It was humid. It was like, so it was around 30, 35 degrees morning, noon, and night. But
Oh man.
it was the humidity was 100% all the time. So you were always wet. You know, even like you would have to take off your clothes off, all your clothes off, nearly between each take. Like never mind between each scene. You know, you would get that wet that quickly, and you know, so you have to dry yourself off with hair dryers and fans and ice yourself down. So like the logistics of it were quite tricky. Um, you know, it's hard to believe they've done 10 series out there, but I suppose they have it down to a fine art. But it was yeah, no, it was never less than very engaging and interesting, quite demanding as well, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I mean, all the actors that have played the detective role, they've all ended up kind of wearing suits, you know, suits and ties and shirts and things.
Yeah,
And you're kind of like, oh my God, you know, you must be
I know.
absolutely roasting.
They've all ended up shells of their former selves.
Yeah. Ben Miller was in like, you know, full suit for his
Yeah, he
episode. So
was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. He did the first 2 series,
yeah,
and you know, he has spoken a lot about it as well, just about how demanding it was physically. You know,
yeah,
um, and you know, the heat is really oppressive. You know, and it's hard to convey that because it looks great, and you know, it seems churlish or something to even to even mention it. Uh, but it was just a factor, you know, that you had to deal with, and you had to learn how to deal with it fairly quickly. Um, but it was absolutely fine, you know, once you got used to it, you know. But sometimes, like, you know, particularly the scenes we used to do in the police station, and a
yeah.
lot of the scenes were done in the police station, and they tended to be the less interesting scenes because they were the times like we would just recap, you know, we would just regurgitate the sort of information that we had to date. Do you know what I mean? It was like, you know, we have 4 suspects and each of them had a motive, and then you'd have to go through each of the suspects and their motives, you know. So it was kind of the scenes kind of you know, the you know, the blurred into each other in a way. So they were the most tricky scenes, but the police station was the most demanding environment to film in. So it was like a furnace in there. Like it was unbelievably hot, and there was no air conditioning and no way there was really no way of cooling down in there. And you know, you'd be doing those scenes and you would have to know them so well
Yeah.
because many of your organs would shut down during the day, like literally for self-preservation reasons, you know. So your heart would stop for maybe an hour, and then, you know, your lungs would stop working, and you know, your kidneys and everything else. So, and your brain most of all would stop
Yeah,
after a
yeah,
while.
yeah.
Like it would literally be melting, like it would be just overheated. And you know, like the way your fan comes on in your laptop when it's been overheating for too long, you could kind of hear that fan whirring in your brain after a while. And you had to be able to kind of spout those lines almost in your sleep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? On autopilot, because like in the Caribbean as well, it's kind of odd. Like you've only got 12 hours of daylight. Doesn't matter what time of the year it is. It's light from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening, and that's it. So that's when you have to film, and you've got to get everything done during the course of that day. You can't film at night because of the frogs and everything else. So we do very few night scenes, you know. because there's always creatures like just crickets, frogs, wild dogs, like wild hens. Like it's the wildlife is remarkable. So no, it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, sleeping must have been awful,
oh, I
trying
didn't.
to.
You wouldn't sleep for 6 months. You literally wouldn't sleep. I mean, the sleeping. So you would tend to stay in air conditioned villas, all right. But so
Yeah.
you'd have the air conditioning going full blast. You'd have a fan on the ceiling going full blast. You'd be covered in a mosquito net, with the mosquitoes whirring around you outside the mosquito nets. Then you've got the cocks crowing all night long, the wild hens. You got the wild dogs savaging the wild hens. You can hear
Oh
all
my
of that.
God.
You've got the frogs, that kind of cacophony, that kind of chorus of like the cheeping, cheep, 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 cheep all night long. It's very shrill and very, very loud. So you got that going. You got the crickets and the locusts, so it's just incessant, the noise. So yeah, and then you got the crazy rum dreams. Like the local rum is a sensational product, and it's very cheap as well out there. The only thing actually that was quite cheap out there was the local rum. So you develop a taste for that after a while, and of course that doesn't help with the sleeping either. So yeah, it was. That might explain why you could only do 3 or 4 series of it. You literally physically couldn't do any more than that. I mean, it would be impossible.
Yeah.
And I'm asked this a lot, like
Yeah.
why did you leave it? And like you'd have to experience it to understand why you would leave such a dream job. Like I mean, for a lot of
Yeah.
people, that would be a dream job. I'm working in the Caribbean for 6 months of the year, uh, but, and it is on one level. Don't get me wrong, and I'm at pains to point that out as well. Like it's very enjoyable on lots of levels, but it's physically impossible to do it. Indefinitely.
Yeah. It's such a great cast, though. I love watching the surprise guests. Like a well-known actor or an actress would appear as a murder suspect.
Yeah.
You'd see like
Brilliant.
Mark Benton turning up and Simon Day turning up, and all
Oh,
these kind
brilliant.
of.
Yeah, incredible. Simon Callow, like
Yes.
legends of the stage in London, or up and coming actors that you see a couple of years later, winning Oscars or something, so
Yeah.
it's phenomenal, and again, bit like Ted in that respect. That was the big attraction. We're out there in the island year round or whatever, for months of the year, and these guys are only over for 2 weeks, so they're on a jolly basically.
Yes.
Someone once said to me it was like a competition for equity members. Like you do, you kind of win a competition to go out for 2 weeks to the Caribbean and do 3 or 4 scenes, or pretend to be dead for 2 weeks, like in the case of the victim. So it was but we loved having them out, because it was our island, and
Yeah.
we knew the
Yeah.
island inside out. So you kind of show it off to them and bring them to the on the days off, bring them to all the the attractions, the waterfalls and whatnot, and the swim with the turtles and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there were a lot of compensations, no doubt about it.
Yeah. So it obviously trumped getting a part in Holby or
Yeah, I think
casually.
so. Yeah, definitely, definitely. But a lot of responsibility, as the main actor. You
Yeah.
kind of you're in every scene, so you don't have the fun that everyone else is having in
Yeah.
the sense that you have very few days off. And then you got to learn these very long monologues as well. You've got the denouement scene, which can take 10 or 15 minutes. It's pages long. It's like a little mini show, a little Edinburgh show, where you're doing the summing up at the end of each
Yeah.
episode. So that's so you're always very busy, but that's a good thing. Like from an actor's point of view, you want to be busy, I think, and you want to you get to work with all these actors. That was really brilliant. Like even though the show itself, I suppose, is not hugely demanding in terms of in terms of your range. You know what I mean? It's not heavy drama. You're not
Yeah.
digging deep. You're not doing any of these big heavy emotional scenes a lot of the time. So there is this kind of a soapy element to it, but like that shouldn't really take away from the challenge for an actor. Like you have to make hundreds of decisions
Mm.
every day, like as how you're going to go about something, and you've only limited time to do it in as well. You don't have the luxury of lots of rehearsal or endless retakes, so you have to be very clear in your own mind as to what you need to do. And then you're working with other actors, and you're kind of second guessing them, and you're dovetailing with each other, and you're watching and listening and all that stuff, which is the pleasure of acting, as most actors will tell you. It's all about, that connection with another actor. And then you're working with great directors
Yeah.
who, who are bringing all their experience to bear on it. And so you're learning every day, and it's very satisfying on lots of levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's always seemed to be sort of gearing towards that light bulb moment. When you figured out who'd done it, you were like an Irish Miss Marple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I know it's but I mean, I always figured out who'd done it anyway, just after a few pages reading the script. No, it's yeah, I mean, it's very formulaic, but that's part of its cheeky charm. It's, I mean, the big pleasure for the audience, I think, is the fact that it's a kind of a puzzle to be solved. That the world is going to be set to rights by the end of it all.
Mm.
It's clearly a light drama with its tongue in cheek. And I kind of quite enjoyed the summing up bits, when the light
Yeah.
bulb goes off, and then you gather up all the suspects and you do your big denouement scene. I used to quite enjoy that as a kind of a, as a stand-up performer. It was the only time you were really in control, yourself, like we weren't relying on other actors or anyone else. Like, it was your little moment to shine. And I think from the character's point of view, it was his little moment to shine. The performer in the character quite enjoyed those scenes, showing off his powers of deduction.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing as a viewer, with most of these kind of detective things, at the beginning, you're kind of think, I know who done it. I know who done it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of waiting to find out if you were right, or whether it was something
Yeah.
totally unforeseen, as most things tend to be.
Yeah, well, writers are going to be pains in the arse. They're always going to try and wrong foot you and really kind of annoy you by the end, or sometimes it's two people, and that always kills me. Come on, that's such a cop out. But I mean, hats off to the writers. It's pretty ingenious. They come up with these locked room mysteries,
Yeah.
these ingenious puzzles week in, week out, and sometimes as an actor or a character, you do feel you're playing second fiddle to the puzzle. That it's a bit about the puzzle. Of course, the island is a big character as well. I mean, that's another part of the attraction. This show goes out in winter in Britain in January.
Yeah.
And it's when people start booking their summer holidays, like obviously pre-pandemic and everything. This was people had done research on this, and that Death in Paradise came out at exactly the right time, and that's why it attracted such a huge viewership. People were just coming through Christmas, feeling a bit sorry for themselves, skint, and they always reckon, I think it's the 15th of January is the most depressing day of the year. But Death in Paradise comes on.
It's on.
There's a little bit of sunshine and a little bit of undemanding drama to pass the time, and then they go online afterwards and book a holiday.
I mean, St. Marino has become like a Jessica Fletcher. You kind of think it's one of these places that, like, you don't live there, because you will probably end up getting bumped off at some at some point in time.
High, yes.
So you mentioned there about stand-up. So you're returning to stand-up.
I never didn't do stand-up. Like I always did it. As far as was practical, like between sort of TV jobs, if you like. And then last year, 2019, which was the last year one could go on tour. I went on tour like 3 times that year. So I did I did spring of 2019, big tour of the UK. Then I went off to the Caribbean to finish off that once and for all. And then autumn of 2019, I came back and did another part of that tour.
Yeah.
And then spring of 2020, just before the pandemic, I finished that tour. So it was kind of a 3-legged tour over a 1.5-year period. So I just finished literally on March the 7th, 2020, like 4 days before we locked down. So it was kind of perfect timing, I suppose. And it was probably the most enjoyable tour I'd ever done. So funny enough, as I got older, I enjoyed stand-up more and, got more out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a lot of comedians now are kind of looking forward to getting back in front of an audience in any way, shape or form. I mean, how do you think stand-up is going to change? Do you think it will change in the sort of the future, the way things have been over the last year? Do you think it's going to change the way stand-up works?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I'd be a bit anxious about it actually.
Mm.
Just not quite knowing what to expect. I've done a few online gigs, more to keep my, to just sort of keep that part of
Yeah.
the brain working. And I enjoyed the experience. I think it just helped to stay sharp, and to yeah. I mean, if you didn't have that, you probably wouldn't bother writing stuff. So like
Mm.
it helped. And I didn't think I'd like the online stuff, but it worked fine. It was good. Yeah, it was. I did a full length online show only last week, and I really enjoyed it. Surprising myself actually how much I enjoyed it, and how it was, like I thought the audience would be really bored after 20 minutes, but they weren't. They were very casual, like they're sitting at home, I suppose, and they can close the laptop if they want. uh, so I quite enjoyed that, and I'm going to do a live show like in a couple of weeks' time, the first live show back. So I'll report back to you once
Very
I
good.
once
I
once
look
once,
forward to
once I do
it.
that.
Yeah. So it must be crazy not having that audience interaction that you would have as a
Yeah,
in a venue,
yeah. It's funny, like it's. But it's kind of hard to say from me from where I'm standing, because I had toured. I'd got a lot of it out of my system.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like it took me 5 years probably to write that touring show. So even though I've been doing it in bits and pieces over the years, like I hadn't really planned to tour in this year, or most of last year. Like I sort of I'd done everywhere. I'd played everywhere I wanted to play, and I thought that was going to be it for a few years, and
Mm.
I was going to do other things. So it's not the biggest priority in the world for me. But I am very curious as to see, what the landscape's going to be like when we get back out there. I suspect it'll probably go back to normal enough in a few years' time.
Yeah.
I mean, the world has shifted a little bit, I suppose. I mean, it's shifted in a few ways. Like you have a lot of comedians now who have come of age on social media,
Yeah.
who have never done a live gig and may never do a live gig. So
Mm.
that's another factor, which really doesn't apply to me, someone of my generation, in any way, really. I mean, I'd be very curious to see what they're doing and everything else, but they have a way of, they can make a living purely from doing comedy on social media and stuff like that. So there's that happening. So you wonder whether like the live thing will come back to the same extent,
Mm.
or whether that's going to be sort of something that that audience might get older. Do you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
audience for live comedy might be the audience who've been going to live comedy for the last 10 or 15 years, but they might age. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thing that I'd be kind of interested in seeing where it all goes. Like, but my experience of the last tour was great. Audiences were very healthy, they were very good. So whether it's just going to suddenly collapse because of the pandemic, I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. But it'll come back in some form.
Yeah, I mean they're trialing gigs now, aren't they? Up
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
in town at the moment. So,
yeah,
if they can come back, then surely
yeah.
we'll
No,
have
no,
a
no, it's interesting. And then, of course, tastes change as well. So not only do
yeah.
the meat change, but the tastes change and trends change, and obviously a huge emphasis, rightly so, on diversity and everything as well. So it's all up in the air, really. But I think it'd be a mistake to worry too much about those sort of things, no matter who you are. To try and second guess what's going on. I think as an artist, or as a performer, and I use that word like kind of lightly, slightly ironically, but as a comedian, comedy person, you always just do you do what you can do, and if you do it honestly, and put a bit of effort into it, and rely on your own comedy instincts and everything else, like you'll find your place, like you'll find your niche. Like you can't overthink these things, or worry about them too much, or
Yeah.
analyze them too much. I mean, that's always been my approach to comedy from day one. Is like, you go out there, you prepare your 20 minutes or your hour or your hour and a half or whatever
Hmm.
it is you're doing, and you go out and do it. And if you're lucky enough, you'll have a promoter, or some sort of management, or somebody, people around you, to put the thing on, or the comedy promoter, the comedy venue, or whoever
Yeah.
will sort out that side of it. And you turn up with your well crafted show, and see what happens. You'll find your audience, and it might be a small audience, it might be a big audience, who knows, depending on trends, fashions, and everything else. But
Yeah.
you can't control that. So I think the key thing for anyone in any walk of life, but certainly in this walk of life, is to not worry about the things that are beyond your control. You know,
Yeah,
all,
yeah, very
all you
true.
can do is what you do, and and I do the same thing as I've done every day of my life for the last 40 years. Is I get up in the morning, I scratch my head, and I sit down at a desk, and I don't quite know what's going to happen, and I hope something will happen, and you try and write something, and eventually over time you've got the bones of a show, and you go out and do it. So that's served me okay.
I mean, would you be a comedian that, I mean, would you carry a notebook, or have you like, would you put notes into your phone if you say you get an idea while you're out and about, you might see something.
Yeah,
Do you find you make notes a
well,
lot?
I actually sit down at my desk a lot. Like I do, unless I'm traveling or working on a TV thing or whatever. I do sit at home like for 3 or 4 hours a day most days, with a notebook. So I actually sit down and do it. But yeah, if I think of something when I'm out and about, I will put it down. Not religiously, like not in an annoying way. I've seen people over the years, like while you're at the table with them, they'll take out a notebook and they'll write down something you said, not even something they said. Really, really annoying. You try and remember things. Like if you are in the middle of a conversation and you happen to say something very funny, you try and remember it, and then of course you forget it.
Yeah, yeah,
You never write it down. It's like trying to write. It's like when you wake up in the middle of the night after a dream, and you say, "Oh, I must write that down," and of course in the
it's
morning it's
gone.
gone. But yeah, no, I I try and jot down most ideas I have at some stage. Yeah.
Yeah, you did a documentary recently with Tommy Tiernan about swearing. I
Yeah.
mean, how did that all come about? But was that filmed during lockdown,
Yeah,
or?
yeah, that was yeah. So there's a guy I work with regularly called Jerry Hoban, and we've done documentaries on and off over the years, usually about, I suppose, subjects that kind of explain to ourselves what it is to be Irish.
Mm,
Was one a few years ago we did on funeral culture, death notices, that sort of thing, and our approach to sort of death and everything else. And it was a really nice show, and we'd done a few other things together as well, and so we were kind of looking around for something that could be achievable during lockdown. There was
yeah,
so many things weren't. You just couldn't do an awful lot of the things you would normally want to do. So we thought a documentary was one thing we could do, and we came up with this idea about swearing and the Irish relationship with swearing, because like everyone you speak to, like recognizes that we do have not necessarily a problem with swearing, but we have a facility with swearing. We enjoy it. We love it.
yeah,
It's part of our everyday discourse. It's a huge part of Irish life and the way we communicate. So we were kind of surprised that no one had ever really done anything like this before, to try and explain to ourselves why it is we might, the possible reasons why we might curse and swear so much. So we did a little bit of research on it, and we sort of ran it by RTE, and they kind of liked the idea, and they thought it was the kind of thing you could turn around reasonably quickly without compromising, COVID guidelines and everything
yeah.
else. So we sort of did it just before and after Christmas, and it went out a few months ago, and it was just great to do something. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like so many people in our business and comedy and drama and music and everything, just haven't been able to do anything. So to be able to do something like that, to get your teeth into it and to distract you from the horrors of the
yeah.
pandemic and everything else, it was a project I really, really enjoyed, and I really got my teeth into it, and loved it. And we interviewed great people like Tommy Tiernan, and great writers like Lisa McInerney, and the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Hazel Chew, and we just had, we just spoke to great people, a GA referee, you know. So to get different takes on it, and we yeah, it was okay, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even the word feck sort of, became part of vocabulary, didn't it, after Ted,
It did a bit, yeah. I mean, it was always there, but I suppose it just became popularized, and it's a very mild entry level swear word, obviously, and
Yes.
because it's clear, obviously, not just in Ireland, everywhere you go, that you do need swear words. It's a very important part of the vocabulary. It doesn't make you stupid or coarse or vulgar or anything else. It's kind of a necessary part of your your everyday language. Obviously, if you hurt yourself or something, you need some sort of a swear word to turn to.
So let's talk a little bit about music now. So have there been any major music loves in your life, be it a band or an artist that you've kind of, you would have followed through their career, or just had this love affair with this particular artist?
I mean, there's so many. I wouldn't really know where to start. I suppose my big awakening was like when I was about 15. My cousin from England arrived with his punk collection. So he introduced me, a very naive 15-year-old boy, to things like Sex Pistols and The Clash and Sham 69 and
Yeah.
X-Ray Specs, and the bands from that era, kind of late 70s English punk. And that sort of began a lifelong, I suppose, love affair with that sort of genre, the kind of punk into new wave, into right up to the present day. So I've always loved that type of music, I suppose. Indie guitar bands and Pixies, Radiohead, all that kind of stuff. Always loved that. But I have very fogyish tastes as well. Like I love Van Morrison, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
I love that era, and that was sort of the music I was listening to when I discovered punk. So that was music before my time, but I inherited it from my older sister or whatever, and that generation. But it's music I go back to time and time again. So and then I went through my jazz blues period, and I love all genres. I mean, it'd be very, very hard to pick one band or one artist, because it literally changes from day to day. It's like favorite books, favorite anything. The last guy I discovered was Max Richter. He was amazing, and that was last weekend. Basically, I finally came around to Max Richter. Richter. So yeah, so it's always discovering new stuff. I love country music as well. Absolutely, it's probably where I come from, in the border region. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, I suppose, having older siblings as well, being the third child, there's always that kind of transition between your older siblings. They're kind of like, letting you listen to their records, and it's a good way of finding artists that your older siblings liked.
Yeah, I wasn't really like it was probably only in my sort of late 20s, 30s where I really got into music, like in a big way, where it was background up to that point, really. And then it wasn't until, and I suppose it's meeting key people in your life as well, and people introducing you to music. And I used to go to a lot of live music, like in my college days in Dublin. Like there was as I think I alluded to earlier, there was a huge music scene in Dublin at that time. And I used to love all those kind of guitar bands in Dublin, Stars of Heaven and Blue in Heaven, and those Nervous Animals and the Blades above all. There was just a fantastic underground music scene, and it was literally every night. And it was great. And there was a kind of a jazzy blues scene in Dublin, which is underrated, underestimated. And then you would have visiting blues legends like John Lee Hooker and people, Dr. John, the New Orleans boogie woogie piano player. I remember going to see all those visiting artists when they'd come to Dublin. So we were kind of spoilt in a way in those days for live music. So it's a lifelong journey, as as everyone knows, and it's one of the great pleasures in life, is discovering a new band, or and sometimes you go to Electric Picnic to do your comedy thing, and then you wander around, and you I think the last Electric Picnic I was at was probably 2019, and discovered Sons of Kemet, an amazing sort of jazz collective from London, very radical, very political. It's just a tuba and a sax basically, and two massive drum units, and the sound they make, the noise they make is incredibly powerful. But when you dig into it, it's very political as well, and that's really, really exciting. And to discover that, and then of course you might read a review or something, then or and then you go down a rabbit hole on Apple Music, and that's how I come by my music. Or you're watching something on TV, on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and you hear a song and you go, "Oh, what's that?" and you go and look into it, and that's how I find my stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of festivals. You can just be wandering past the tent and hear something that's kind of sounds really great, and you're wandering in, and it could start, as you say, down this whole rabbit hole of new music from different people.
Yeah, I think at the last electric picnic as well, I think I exactly that happened. I wandered past the tent and Brittany Howard was in it, and there was only about 50 people there. It was ridiculous. I mean, she's just an incredible presence and voice. Um, doing this incredible soulful stuff, and there was hardly anyone there. It was kind of, it's embarrassing, the way we get embarrassed, like why isn't there thousands of people for Brittany?
Yeah. No, I was there. I was actually there. I was in the tent that time, and I didn't know too much about her. I had friends who'd said, "Oh, you have to check this woman out. She's fantastic." And she's there. She's got no shoes on, and
Yeah,
she's, just totally going for it. And she's
yeah.
just incredible.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'd heard, I think, one song of hers before, and I didn't like it. I wasn't there because I was like, think I must go and see Brittany Howard. I
Yeah,
was just
yeah, yeah,
fascinated. I just heard the sound. So yeah, that's good. I mean, like, I love LCD sound system. That would
yeah.
probably be the thing I play most.
Hmm.
It's just, I don't know. It's something I kind of respond to a lot. Those kind of uplifting anthems with the tinge of regret.
I mean, would you write with music on in the background, or is it too distracting?
It's a bit too distracting. I've tried a lot. Something like Max Richter might work.
Yeah,
I think it's that minimalism, that kind of classical minimalism. And I used to always love that Steve Reich kind of thing, and Philip Glass and people like
yeah.
that. So this could work. Yeah, yeah, definitely. But I do get distracted by the music as well. If you like it, like, you want to listen to the music too. So, and my brain doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work well at the best of times, but certainly I need to concentrate on one thing at a time. The last gig I was at was it was just before lockdown as well. It was January that year,
Hmm.
so it was Lankham in Vicar Street.
Oh,
The
cool.
yeah, the kind of Irish traditional. Well, calling them a traditional band is ridiculous because
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
more than that. They've got a kind of a punk ethos as well, and they've reinvented Irish music really, and that was extraordinary. That was just an extraordinary experience. I brought my whole family to it. It's one of the few times I just insisted, you must come to this. You're not staying in, you're not living in this house unless you see Lancome with me. And they were all blown away by it. I mean, just the sound they create. I mean, there's only 4 or 5 of them, but it's incredible layers of sound. Drones I'm pretty sure instruments they've invented themselves. And so they just create this incredible sonic landscape.
yeah.
But they reinterpret like great songs like Wild Rover and stuff like that, as well as their own original stuff. So it's just really, it's really quite something. And that was the last gig I was at.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of Vicar Street, though, isn't it? You can go there and see a band, but you can also go and see stand up there, and
Yeah,
it's still very intimate.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a brilliant venue. It's really we're lucky to have it. My last gig there was in November of 2019, and it
Mm.
was, you know, I hope it's not the last time I ever play there, but it was just so great. It was so enjoyable. I don't think I've ever enjoyed a gig in Dublin as much myself. But no, but like, while I wouldn't listen to music when I'm writing, I'd be very inspired by it. And I take great care in making my little compilations for the intro, for the walk-in music while the
Yeah,
audience are coming into my shows. Like, that would
yeah,
be something that I curate very carefully, because I think that's part of the experience. You want people to, while they're sitting there waiting for the performer to come on, like, you want them to maybe to introduce them to something they haven't heard before,
yeah,
or you know, just make their ears prick up in some way. And I find, like, you know, it definitely feeds into what you do um, in terms of themes, in terms of what people are singing about and talking about, and just I'm always struck by, like, just the originality. You think every idea has been mined for all
yeah,
it's worth, and of
yeah.
course it hasn't. Like, everyone has a new take on everything else. So listening to a great songwriter like John Prine or someone like that, who I've been
Mm.
listening to a lot lately since he died, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
And I saw him in Electric Picnic donkeys years ago, doing something, and he's just a great American songwriter, very quirky, very humorous, very bittersweet, and it definitely inspires you. It just, you in terms of the way you might phrase something yourself. You know, you think there's another way of phrasing it, a better way of phrasing it, you know, or like in terms of a little idea that sparks off an idea that you're struggling with, you know.
Yeah.
So, and it's only by exposing yourself to that, like to music or to reading or to watching movies or watching dramas or something, that you're exposed to these ideas that you know, like I've often started something in terms of stand up and I've ditched it because I thought it's too obvious, it's too prosaic, it's too boring, too this or it's too that. And then you hear someone singing a song about it and you think, well, they managed to make it not boring. And, you know, so I can do that. And then you go back to it and you revisit it and you just find a new angle, you know, which you wouldn't have found if you just shut yourself away in a dark room and never listened to anything or watched anything.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? You know, saying about like John Prine there, about how a lot of artists seem to become bigger after they pass away. They get more of a following after they die, you know. So many examples.
Yeah, you can imagine how popular Bob Dylan will be when he dies.
Oh my goodness.
No, it's just endlessly brilliant, you know. It's just great. Great to be a human when you've that going on.
Yeah, very, very true. So thank you so much for giving me your time today, Ardal, and chatting with me. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Very welcome. Thank you, Paula. Cheers.